Coach, people speak of the 9 titles out of the last 10 years, but you've been at UCLA for some 25 years now. You kind of look back, well, what happened the first 15 years?
Well, a lot of things have had to fall in place during the last 10 years for us to have all the championships. And I actually feel that my first 15 years there, I had, I think, 7 teams that could have won the championship. I think they were good enough, perhaps on certain occasions, but let's say that one team was beaten by USF when they had Bill Russell, and we weren't that good. But if USF hadn't had Bill Russell, I believe that we might have won it that year. And there have been various things happen, so a lot of things have to fall in place.
Has the John Wooden coaching philosophy changed over the years? Have you, certainly you've had to adapt to the game. The game has changed. Has your philosophy changed?
My basic philosophy has not changed. I still feel that there are 3 important things. One is to get them in condition, and of course there are different ways for that. I think they must accept the fact that conditioning is a part of what they do between practices as well as what they do during practice. You have to teach them not only to execute the fundamentals properly, but they must be done quickly. I spend roughly 2 hours each day with my assistants planning the practice program for that afternoon, and we're trying to develop and devise drills that will demand quick execution of the fundamentals as well as doing them properly. And then the third thing is that I do demand team play. I want unselfishness, and I'm not interested in the big scores. I've noticed that the nation's leading scorer never plays on the national championship team, and the same thing is true in the professional basketball practically all the time. So my basic philosophy has changed. I believe I've improved. I think I've learned more, not only about techniques, but about working with various types of individuals and how to get them to develop and perform as a unit. I think I've learned more in that respect.
Tonight on Update 2 of A Weekend with Coach John Wooden, he talks about motivation and recruiting at UCLA.
Well, certainly it's something that we must be aware of at all times, but I try to motivate my team by their own pride. I tell them that regardless of what happened before, it's only what you're doing now that counts, and you should have pride to at all times try to do your best. I talk to them along this line not only for games, but at our practice, each and every practice. That I make it quite clear to my players, if they don't feel like practicing, I don't want them there. I don't think you can improve if you're there in giving a half-hearted effort. I want full attention. Our practices aren't long. I think most coaches practice longer than we do. But we don't waste any time from the time we start our practice. They're carefully organized, and we move quickly from one drill to the other, and we have no standing drills. I never stand and talk to my players in practice. Once practice starts, we keep moving. If something goes wrong, I'll take out an individual and speak to that individual. I'm not going to keep, say, 14 players standing while I'm talking to one. And I keep them moving that way, and tell them that each individual team and each individual player must establish his own identity, and he can only do it by day in, day out effort. He can't do it once a week.
Obviously, success has probably made recruiting easy. Do you ever find that maybe you've got recruiting problems in reverse? There are more good players that would like to play at UCLA than actually that you can handle.
Well, contrary to your opinion, I feel that it has made it, in many respects, more difficult for us. The fact that we have done so well, most of our opponents now use that against us, and they talk to players. For example, I spent a good part of yesterday with a prospect in whom we're interested, and one of the things he says is that, will I start next year as a freshman? So-and-so has told me I would start, and somebody else has told me I'd start. And I said, I've never told a player in all my coaching experience that he would start as a freshman or a sophomore as soon as he became eligible for varsity competition. I didn't tell Bill Walton that. I didn't tell Louis Alcindor that, who is now Kareem Jabbar. I will never tell a player that. But if you're going to start someplace else, and I won't promise you that, then neither they're not going to be as strong as we are, and they're deprecating your ability, or they're just trying to give you a line to keep you from coming here. I'm not interested in a player who I think will not play. I don't know when, but I think he will play. So we hit this constantly among our opponents, and I think it affects some.
Coach John Wooden is not only a coach, but several times an author. You can tell by his eloquence, his command of the English language. Tomorrow on Update 3 of A Weekend with Coach John Wooden, he talks about his latest book and the emotions of basketball. I read something the other day, I don't know whether it was in one of your books or whether it was in a news release. You said that they never talk too much about our defense. It's always about our offense. And you had an interesting line. You said, I always try to get to our opponent's emotions. Explain that.
Well, if a player or a coach starts permitting his emotions to take over, then I think reason flies out the window. I try to get my players to never permit their emotions to take over. I try on the bench never to let my emotions show. I think if I show that I'm distraught and upset, that may carry over to my players. I constantly tell them the player that loses his temper will be outplayed. Now, they could very well tell me, if I let my emotions take over, that the coach who loses his temper will be outcoached. So I try to keep my emotions under control and try to get that idea across to my players at all times.
You have had two great big men in the past few years. What after Bill Walton? Is there another one on your freshman team?
Well, the Bill Waltons don't come along very often, as you know. We have a freshman this year that was on our squad from San Diego, from where, not the same high school, but Bill Walton also came from San Diego, Ralph Drollinger. He's 7 feet tall, and he made, in my opinion, enormous progress this year working against Walton. And I believe with the experience that he's going to get in another year working against Walton, that he's going to be a real fine player. But unfortunately, a lot of people are going to try to feel that he should be another Walton. And all I want him to do to be is a Ralph Drollinger.
There are constant changes in every phase of sports. On Part 4 of A Weekend with Coach John Wooden, he talks about his suggestions for changes in the rules of college basketball.
There are several changes that I've been advocating without much success, I might say. I'm for the clock. I'm for the 30-second clock, not the 24-second as they use in the pros. I think it would help the game in every respect and not hurt it in any way. A number of years ago, in the mid-'60s, I was on the Rules Committee, and at that time, Mr. Iba was coaching at Oklahoma State, and we had his teams checked. And they seldom, and he was the foremost exponent, as you know, of ball-control basketball, and they seldom violated even a 24-second count, except in the late stages when they were protecting a lead. Well, it's my contention if it wouldn't bother the style of play of a ball-control team like Iba's, then it wouldn't hurt anybody, and it would eliminate that occasional partial game. I'd like to see that.
The proposal about raising the basket, your thoughts on that subject?
I'm very much against raising the basket, but I've advocated for a number of years a rule which I think would do about the same thing. I've advocated the elimination of the offensive rebound basket. And I've tried this in some of our practice games and practice scrimmages, and I find our players like it. It does several things. It eliminates that basket that some say is very cheap because just a big man being in there can tip it in. It cuts down fouls around the board because the defense won't block out as strenuously because they know the man can't put it back and pass it to somebody and then moves quickly to get position for a return pass. And the offense, in knowing they can't, do not go over your passing. A man gets to the defense as much. They try to play for a position and pull the ball out. I think those things are all parts of the game that would be good. Incidentally, another rule that is in the book that I don't like at all is that raising your hand on a foul. I think that's a terrible rule. I think it further embarrasses the individual on whom the foul is called. And I oftentimes see two players raise their hand, and I think that's embarrassing to the official who called the foul on only one, and he has two of them raising their hands. I think I can't see where the rule really helps anyone. The official himself knows on whom the foul was called, and it's his responsibility to report that to the scorer's bench. The individual doesn't have to run over and report it or raise his hand, in my opinion. I think that's a bad rule that doesn't help officiating. I think it hurts it. You'll find some officials that get very officious about it, and they call a foul, and then they stare at the man, and he's already embarrassed, and sometimes he'll go like this or something. And it's just, sometimes he's just mad at himself because he fouled. And then the official will call it technical, and I think it's because he didn't raise the hand properly, or sometimes. I had a player have one called on him in the tournament. I had two called for this, and never had one before all this year. One was called by a player didn't raise his hand soon enough, and another one was called because a player made a foul. He raised both hands like that, and he wasn't raising it in anger. And sometimes they do, but this wasn't in anger. And I think it's a bad rule. I really don't like it at all.
Coach Wooden, with the obvious success that you've had, I'm certain that you've been tempted by the pros. What has kept you in the college game?
Well, some years ago, I decided that I would never coach basketball any place other than at UCLA. Yes, I have had very tempting offers from a material point of view. They've been, I'd be hard to turn down. But I don't believe the professional life would be the life that I would want to lead, being away as much as you have to be in the various things that conducted with the professional game. It's just not for me.
Coach John Wooden, you have been most kind and courteous. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.